But I don't want to waste any more time. I know you guys want to hear our speaker today. I've known David Blake for quite some time. Mr. Blake, he's a great speaker. I've heard him speak several times in different presentations. But just want to read this about it. Mr. Blake is a financial forensic specialist with the Georgia Department of Human Services Division of Aging Services Forensic Special Initiatives Unit. Before joining DHS in 2010, Mr. Blake served with the DeKalb County Police Department and DeKalb County District Attorney's Office as the Chief Investigator over the White Collar Crime Unit. Mr. Blake is an ACFE Certified Fraud Examiner, NW3C Certified Economic Crimes Forensic Examiner, and a State of Georgia Post-Certification Instructor, and a co-development of a Principal Instructor for the Certified At-Risk Adult Crime Tactics Specialist Certification course. I went through that course a few years ago. It's a tremendous course. If any first responder or mandated reporter needs to go to that class and get that ACE certification, because it's a tremendous class. I have a passion for this. I think I hate to see some our elder citizens in the community working all their lives for their retirement years, and somebody taking their money. But Mr. Blake's going to talk about that, and I'll turn it over to you, Dave.
Ricky, thank you so much for inviting me here today. I really want to say thank you, especially to the Rotary. You all do such a wonderful job out there, and you're so critical to the community. And I really do appreciate you allowing me to speak to you today about a subject it's very difficult, but very near and dear to my heart as well. And that's the abuse of our vulnerable adults here in Georgia. All right, so I work for the Georgia Department of Human Services. And this is an agency that provides a lot of different services for the citizens of Georgia. It can be Meal on Wheels. It can be assistance with Medicare counseling. It can be legal assistance. We have our Elderly Legal Assistance Program. But another major part of our office is the Adult Protective Services, which responds to and investigates cases of abuse, neglect, and exploitation of the elder persons and adults with disabilities. They do this jointly with local law enforcement officers. And so what I'm going to talk about this morning, we'll kind of touch on our unit, which is the Forensic Special Initiatives Unit. We'll talk about who is considered an at-risk adult. We'll talk about the different types of at-risk adult abuse. We'll talk about mandated reporting and some resources that are available to you. So our unit, it's a very small unit. It's unique. As far as I know, it's the only such unit in existence in the United States. And we were created back in 2006 with the goal of bridging the gap between the social service agencies and the prosecutors and law enforcement to make sure that we're all on the same page in responding to the abuse, neglect, and exploitation of vulnerable adults. Our unit has expanded. We have a forensic registered nurse who is our team leader. I handle the financial part. I'm a certified fraud examiner. We have a forensic victim advocate. And three of us actually have law enforcement background, and three of us are certified law enforcement officers and certified instructors. And we have a forensic social worker who is a supervisor. She should be on our call here today, Shawanda Wright. She just came to us from Adult Protective Services, and we're very fortunate to have her as part of the team. So let's talk for a minute about who are Georgia's at-risk adults. So when we say at-risk adult, it's a term we use with elderly abuse. And so under Georgia statutes, an elder person is considered anyone who is 65 years of age or older. So they are covered by any of the statutes that I'm going to talk about. In addition, a disabled adult. And so what is a disabled adult under the criminal statute in Georgia? It's a person who's 18 years of age or older, mentally or physically incapacitated, or has Alzheimer's disease or dementia. And it gets a little difficult sometimes. What does it mean exactly to be considered incapacitated? And so they codified a definition a few years back because it was causing some issues when we were prosecuting these cases to explain it. And so the definition under the code section is mentally or physically incapacitated means an impairment which substantially affects an individual's ability to provide personal protection, provide necessities, including but not limited to food, shelter, clothing, medical, or other health care, carry out the activities of daily living, or manage his or her resources. So if you look at the way that is defined under the statute, it really is a very broad definition. It really empowers law enforcement and the prosecutors to be able to more effectively hold suspects accountable who abuse and neglect our vulnerable adults. Also, in addition, a resident. So if a person is a resident of a long-term care facility, and it may be a personal care home or a nursing home, if that person is receiving care or treatment in a facility, they are covered under these statutes as well. So in addition to the vulnerable adults I've explained, if you're a younger person and you have a stroke and you're in a facility and you're receiving treatment, you are covered under these criminal statutes as well. And so it's an umbrella term when we say at-risk adult. It's interchangeable with vulnerable adults, and we're talking about an elder person 65 or older, the resident of a long-term care or personal care home, or a disabled adult. So is it a problem here in Georgia? We know that 1 in 5 Georgians can be classified as an at-risk adult. We also know that 1 in 10 at-risk adults are victims, and only 1 in 23 cases are reported. So these are greatly underreported. It's kind of like an iceberg. You only see the tip of it. The majority of it's hidden from sight. We also know that individuals with intellectual disabilities or development disabilities or mental health issues are 4 to 10 times more likely to be victimized than the general population. We also know that 70% of adults with disabilities say they have been the victim of abuse, and that more than 90% say that such abuse occurred on multiple occasions. So we have a lot of these victims that are being repeatedly victimized. Sadly, when we talk about abuse of the elderly, we know that approximately 90% of the abusers are going to be the adult children of the victim, or spouses or partners. When we talk about a disabled adult, we know that 97% to 99% of the suspects are going to be the caregiver or trusted friends of that person. So they're being actually abused by loved ones. And we know that it doesn't matter. It crosses all lines. It's an all-inclusive problem. It doesn't matter your race, your sex, your gender, your social economic background, whether you're rich or poor, your sexual identity. Any person can become the victim of abuse, neglect, and exploitation. So let's talk for just a moment about the different types of abuse. So we talk about abuse, we're talking about emotional, neglect, sexual, physical, and financial abuse. So when we talk about physical abuse, and I think mostly when we say abuse, this is what comes to mind for most individuals. Somebody who's been physically injured by a suspect, and it could be slapping, punching, force feeding, restraining that person improperly, pushing, tripping, compliance holds on that person. Some signs of physical abuse can be bruises on the body that really don't have an explanation. It can be deep bed sores. It can be loss of weight. Changes in the behavior of that person. When you walk into the room, the victim starts cowering when the abuser enters the room as well. Unexplained broken bones, burns. Then we have financial abuse. And this is probably one of our most rapidly growing types of abuse, is the financial abuse, especially of the elderly. They may be forced to withdraw large amounts of cash. There may be a misuse of that power of attorney. I think sometimes individuals think that power of attorney is a license to steal. Having a power of attorney comes with a lot of responsibilities. You have that fiduciary duty to act in the best interest of your client. A lot of times they're threatened to get money. Hey, I'm going to put you into a nursing home if you don't, give me this money. They're forging signatures, and it's really very devastating to our senior citizens because, unlike a younger person, if you become a victim of financial crime, you can go back to work. You can, make up that money loss. An elder person can't do that many times. They can't go back to work. That's their life savings, and when they lose that, it can be devastating. And I can tell you from personal experience, when I worked in the district attorney's office at DeKalb, especially, our victims many times had perfectly normal lives. they were scammed or financially taken advantage of, and they lose their entire life savings, they lose their home, and the impact is absolutely very devastating to them. And I've watched their health decline, and I've watched them pass away when I think normally they probably would have had a lot more years of life left in them. It's very heartbreaking, these cases. Some possible signs of when I talk about financial abuse, it can be a person of trust who isolates the victim from others so they can take advantage of them, get them away from their support structure. Change in the status, used to save money, say they're frugal, and suddenly they're withdrawing large amounts of money from their account. Appoint someone new to handle their affairs. They may be missing jewelry. They may be quick claim deeds where they're changing their house to the possession of someone else. Then we have neglect, and it can be withholding of food, medication, not taking that person to receive medical attention. They may be left in bed for days at a time, have no access to the wheelchairs, their canes, their walkers. They may end up using a bucket for a toilet. They may lack appropriate clothing for the weather. Some possible signs of neglect: malnourishment, dehydration, extreme dirtiness. A lot of times their dental health has declined tremendously. That can be a big red flag. They may have injuries that are untreated. They may have chronic medical conditions that are not being treated. They may not be receiving their prescriptions. There may be hoarding. There may be diversion of their prescriptions to the abuser. There may be other unemployed adults living in the vulnerable adult's home. Then we have self-neglect. Self-neglect is not a crime, but it may still need to be investigated by Adult Protective Services to see if they can help that person. The indicators of self-neglect are similar to neglect. And so when we say neglect, you have passive neglect, which is self-neglect, and then you have active neglect, which is intentionally neglecting that person. We also know that neglect many times is the outward sign of financial exploitation. Then we have emotional abuse. It may include, but not limited to, threats on that person, intimidation, harassment, humiliation, verbal assaults, insults, berating that victim, beating them down mentally. And we know that this can be just as devastating as physical abuse. And then we have sexual abuse, which may include, but not limited to, rape, inappropriate touching, using inappropriate photos of that victim, posting those photographs on social media. There may be taking advantage of unconscious victims. There may be sexual harassment. They may force them to view sexually explicit material. And so some physical indicators of sexual abuse may be infections, bruising or lacerations around the genital area, torn, bloody underclothing. That person may have difficulty walking, sitting, other physical injuries as well, bruises on their wrist, their neck. So that was a really quick overview of the different types of abuse that we respond to and we look for. And so we know that abuse is a problem here in Georgia, but we also want to make sure that it's being properly reported. So in Georgia, we have mandated reporting laws where professionals, anyone pretty much who provides a service or interacts with a vulnerable adult, if they see suspected abuse, they have to report it. So let's talk about that just for a moment. They also are required reasonable cause to believe. So if a mandated reporter has a reasonable cause to believe that a disabled adult or an elder person has been the victim of abuse other than by accidental means, neglected or exploited, they shall cause the report to be made. And they're going to report to local law enforcement and to either Adult Protective Services or the Healthcare Facility Regulation. I'm going to explain those two agencies in just a moment. So what is reasonable cause? It's kind of along the same lines as a law enforcement officer who has to have probable cause to make an arrest. It's a fact or circumstance that justifies a reasonable suspicion, a reason that would motivate a person of ordinary intelligence under the circumstances to believe that abuse had occurred. And let me give you a couple of examples of that. Say you're a medical professional, say you're a certified nursing assistant, and you have a client that has a pressure ulcer that is filled with pus, dirt, and debris. This would rise to the level of reasonable cause to believe. We know with pressure sores, decubitus ulcers, that anyone can get them, and sometimes they are uncurable, but they can always be treated. So are they being properly cared for, cleaned out, medicated? That can be very important. Say if you're a bank teller, so bank tellers are mandated reporters. If they have a client and they see that that person's trying to take large amounts of cash out and the response from the client's none of your business, that can be a big red flag. So that would rise to the level of a reasonable cause to believe, and they need to go ahead and file a report. And so there's two tracks when we talk about mandated reporting. In the community setting, which is responded to by local law enforcement and adult protective services, and then also if we have it where the abuse is going on in a facility setting like a personal care home or a nursing home, it will be reported to the Healthcare Facility Regulation Division in local law enforcement. So if it's in the community setting, it's covered under Title 30, and any person who's required to report child abuse also has to report abuse of a vulnerable adult. And that can include physical therapists, occupation therapists, daycare centers, coroners, medical examiners, EMTs, paramedics, first responders, employees or public or private agencies engaged in professional health-related services, financial institutions, even the clergy. If it's not a matter of confession, they have to report it as well. Report to Adult Protective Services and law enforcement. If the disabled adult or elder person is in need of protective services or has been the victim of abuse, neglect, or exploitation, a report shall be made to Adult Protective Services and to local law enforcement or prosecuting attorney's office. You report to Adult Protective Services. We have a 1-866 number, 552-4464, and you will receive a copy of this presentation in a PDF format so you don't have to write all this down. So we have a central intake. It's open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Or you can report online at www.aging.dhs.georgia.gov. And so what we like to advise individuals who are reporting, we'd like you to listen for some tips, and that is you want to be as specific as possible about what you see going on. You want to detail all the different types of suspected abuse. Give as much information as you can relating to the victim and the alleged perpetrator. You can file reports with Adult Protective Services anonymously. However, they can conduct a more thorough investigation if they're able to contact the reporting person. So it's much better if you can actually give your contact information to Adult Protective Services. They will never reveal the identity of the reporter to the alleged victim or the suspect. And we got to remember too that Adult Protective Services is not DFACS, not the Division of Family and Children's Services. When we talk about responding to abuse of a child and responding to the abuse of an adult, we have two different situations. With a child, they are considered not to be able to make decisions, and that empowers the state and law enforcement to be able to respond. But when you talk about an adult has autonomy and self-determination. They can actually decline the assistance of Adult Protective Services to help them. And so that can be kind of frustrating sometimes. As an adult, you can actually make bad decisions. And so when we talk about a long-term care facility setting, and so what is a long-term care facility? It may be a skilled nursing home, it may be an immediate care home, assisted living community, personal care home, or a community living arrangement that is subject to regulation and being licensed by the Department of Community Healthcare Facility Regulation. And so mandated reporting in a facility is covered under Title 31, and it covers basically the same individuals as the community setting. So you report to Healthcare Facility Regulation and to law enforcement. Any person who has knowledge that a resident or former resident has been abused or exploited while residing in a long-term care facility shall immediately make a report to Healthcare Facility Regulation and law enforcement. It's dual reporting. Several years ago, you would only report to HFR or to Adult Protective Services, but we knew that was a problem because both HFR and the Adult Protective Services are not criminal investigations. And so we were losing evidence. Cases were not being able to be prosecuted because evidence was being lost. And so the law was changed several years ago to correct that. So now both agencies, both the social services and regulatory agencies and law enforcement respond at the same time to these calls. So what is a healthcare facility regulation investigation? They actually have two missions out here. HFR will actually regulate, so they provide oversight with state rules and federal rules and regs over facilities to make sure they are in compliance. And in addition, they respond to abuse, neglect, and exploitation. They also investigate reports of unlicensed facilities. So report to healthcare procedure regulation, you report by phone, 1-800-878-6442, or you can report online at dch.georgia.gov/HFR-file-complaint. So here the state is telling you have to report it if you see suspected abuse, but they also offer immunity. So you have a safe harbor if you report suspected abuse. You shall be immune from civil liability or criminal prosecution unless the person who reports acted in bad faith with malicious purpose or was a party to such crime or fraud. So what happens if you see abuse as a professional, you are a mandated reporter, and you fail to report? You can be charged with a crime. It is a misdemeanor in Georgia to fail to report. It can be a penalty of up to 12 months in jail and a $1,000 fine. These are some different resources available through the state. We have our long-term care ombudsman, our agent and disability resource connection, which is really that top number is the gateway to all different resources we have within state, including adult protective services. The second one, the LTCO, is the long-term care ombudsman. Those are the advocates for residents of personal care homes or nursing homes. They do a wonderful job. Then we have the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disability, DBHDD, who covers those individuals who are receiving funding through that organization. And then we have the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit, which responds to and investigates suspected abuse by providers of the Medicaid program. So to help out, I've talked about all these laws, I've talked about these different agencies that can all be kind of confusing. And so we actually developed an app. It's called the GAIN app, which stands for the Georgia Abuse, Neglect, and Exploitation app. It's a free app. You can download it on iPhones or Android phones, and it's just an excellent source of just, I call it a little cheat sheet at your fingertips. If you've got a situation and you don't know who to report to, it'll list all the reporting agencies. It'll also give you resource agencies, the Veterans Administration, different programs that can be helpful if it's not a crime, and who to contact. You can actually file reports through the app. All these laws I just talked about, we list all the criminal statutes and definitions so that they're available to you. And we actually have screening on it, where you can actually do a screening of a person to see if you should report it or not. So it's an excellent resource to everyone. For our law enforcement officers out there, we actually have a special access where they can actually access more parts to the GAIN app, which can help them do their job better. Well, I know I've covered a lot of information very quickly. We do have a lot of other trainings that are available, like Ricky mentioned. We have our At-Risk Adult Crime Tactics Special Certification Program. We normally do that program in person, but because of the COVID, we've had to stop the in-person. So we're actually in the process of launching it as a virtual. If you're a first responder or a professional within the financial community or the medical profession, let me know if you're interested. I can add you to our list and let you know when we have the training, and it's a very well-received certification. That's my contact information. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me, and I will help you any way I can. And so I'll open it up for any questions anyone may have.
How many cases do we have in Georgia?
I don't know if you heard that, David, but how many cases do we have in Georgia?
Oh gosh, Shawanda, are you on? Let me check with my teammate. She actually just came from Adult Protective Services. If she's on.
I'm here, David.
Yes. Do you know offhand how many cases we have roughly in Georgia right now? I don't have the current stats.
Ooh, at this time, the last count was probably about maybe 1,300. However, that number changes from day to day, from the reports that we, get in, and then the workers are closing cases and receiving new cases. So it changes day to day. Also we have our guardianship unit as well, where cases are transferred there, and those cases are open and continuously those individuals are being serviced as well. So that number is kind of a guesstimate right now, because again, it changes from day to day.
And I think also it's safe to say with the COVID that a lot of these are not being reported as well because it's just the victims have been so isolated, especially in the personal care homes and nursing home areas. And so I would say we're probably not getting an accurate number. And in addition, we have a lot of COVID related scams that are really
Right.
targeting our vulnerable adults, our seniors, because they are such a vulnerable to the COVID to have severe reactions to COVID. And so, they're afraid. And so these perpetrators are targeting them with vaccine scams, with, cures. We're seeing a lot of fraud in that area.
Any other questions? Dan?
So how is COVID?
I couldn't hear Ricky.
He said, how has COVID affected your ability to basically do your investigations?
Oh, sure. Shawan, I'll kick that back to you since you just came from Adult Protective Services.
Okay. All right, sure. Well, once we received our orders in last year in March, our workers weren't able to actually go out and do their investigation. So of course that once we resumed going back out in the field toward the end of last year, there was an extreme backlog of cases. So right now the workers are still trying to kind of catch up. They couldn't really go out to see the clients because a lot of the nursing home and the hospitals were not allowing workers in. So that affected the workers being able to do their jobs as well. So it's just been whether we can gain access to the individual again, whether they're in personal care homes, whether they're in a hospital, whether they're quarantining themselves in their own homes because they may say no, they don't want to see the worker, and they have that right to make that decision if they don't want to see the worker or allow them in their homes. So it's been very challenging, but our workers have been very creative in trying to make sure that they are able to see clients. So, for example, if they're in a nursing home setting and was unable to go inside, they've been arranging with staff members, of course, to see them at their windows or to bring them to the front door, but don't open the door, but or also with hospital settings, the workers in the hospital have been setting up Zoom calls where the workers are able to meet with the client over video chatting, or if the client has their own cell phone, a lot of them have been willing to actually chat with the workers through their phones, setting up those video apps. If they're unable to do it, the staff members at the hospital have been so very helpful in assisting the clients with setting up those video apps and showing them how to use it in order to communicate with the APS worker.
Thank you so much. That was a great question.
Any questions online?
Let's see. I don't see anything in the chat.
Okay. Well, as Judge Minter could probably tell us, we see this locally, and it happens probably maybe once a week or maybe a little bit longer than that. But it actually happens a lot. Well, David, thank you for being with us. And, we're getting some feedback through in the room, so it's kind of hard for me to talk.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for inviting me again. What a wonderful organization. You all do such great work. If we can be a resource for you or provide you guidance or additional training, again, if you're in the banking industry, if you're a medical professional, if you're interested in our at-risk adult crime tactics training program, you got my email there. Just reach out to me and I'll put you on our list. It's free. We're actually, our first class will be this month, but it's restricted to right now to all the individuals who were canceled from our in-person class. So they've got the first dibs on getting into the class, but in February we'll be opening up to everyone who's a responder or a professional who deals with abuse, neglect, and exploitation. We'd love to have you in the class. Again, sometimes a question will come up later on. Just reach out to me. Again, consider me a resource to you as well.